Hey, this episode of the Majority Report is brought to you by Manakora Honey. It's getting colder. It's also around holiday time to think of presents for people you love. And this miracle of nature is just the perfect gift. It is a super rare honey that is 100% natural and has some unique properties. Manakora makes Manuka honey. It is a single origin honey that comes from New Zealand. The bees feed on only the nectar of the Manuka tea tree. And it makes honey that is honestly like nothing you have ever tasted before. It has a creamy, almost caramel-like texture. It is the taste is sweet, but just more sophisticated. I don't know what to say. More complex than your typical honey. You use it just like any other type of honey. But what makes Manuka honey super is not just the taste and the sort of like creamy consistency of it. It is super rich in antioxidants and prebiotics, 100 times more than regular honey. On top of that, it contains an antibacterial compound called MGO that can be found exclusively in Manuka honey. Bottom line is, these nutrients support your optimal immune and digestive health, and it is incredibly delicious. It's great. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I'll just take it by the spoonful. But it's great in like a yogurt, or put on your cereal, or put on toast with a little bit of butter and a little bit of Manuka honey. It's great if you've got a sore throat. You put it into your hot water with lemon or with your tea.
I mean, this is off-label, but like if you get cold sores, putting on Manakora honey is supposedly helps heal those kinds of things. I get
that
them
makes total
on
sense.
Occasion. Yes.
I've got a bottle. Well, I've got actually 3 different types. I've got the bottle of the MGO 850. They actually come in different amounts of that MGO, which is that antibacterial compound. But I got a bottle of the 850 Manuka honey. It's apparently their best-selling one. I also have a jar where you scoop it out. I can't remember what the number is on that. Maybe 950. And compostable honey sticks, which are great in lunches or just, I'm walking home from work. I don't want to go get a slice of pizza. I'll take one of those. It really is fantastic. And these things, like, you wouldn't necessarily think about honey as a gift at around the holiday time, but much healthier than, let's say, bringing a bottle of booze or something like that, and totally unique. If you head to manakora.com/majority, you can get $25 off their starter kit, which comes with the MGO 850 plus Manuka honey, a free travel pack of the honey sticks, and a free wooden spoon, and a free guidebook. Perfect gift this time of year. That's manakora.com/majority to get $25 off your starter kit. Again, that has the compostable honey sticks in there. This is just the ultimate honey. Indulge and try some honey with superpowers from Manakora. We'll put the link in the podcast and YouTube description and at majority.fm. And now for that same show I just referenced.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
If I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Wednesday, December 6th, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Ian Millhiser, senior correspondent at Vox, on some of the more prominent Supreme Court cases in front of the court at the moment. Also on the program today, Biden administration reckoning with their strategic failure as Israel continues its onslaught of civilians. The U.S. announces $21 million worth of aid for Gaza.
Oh.
Another one. Another $21 million.
Oh, million with an M.
Correct.
Okay.
Also, the denial of visas to violent Israeli settlers, and also some West Bank Palestinians. I should tell you, a lot of those violent Israeli settlers, they're from Brooklyn.
So they're dual citizens.
They don't need visas. Yeah. Meanwhile, down Pennsylvania Avenue, the House passes the anti-Semitic, dual loyalty assuming anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism resolution. The Senate, Tommy Tuberville, releases his hold on military promotions, leaving our armed services in a quagmire of wokeness. Senate to vote on a procedural vote for supplemental aid to Ukraine and Israel, among other things. Republicans are expected to tank it. And Kevin McCarthy, bye-bye. He leaves for Speaker to cash in. He's going to leave in January. Meanwhile, Patrick McHenry, bye-bye. I think he feels secure enough in his earning potential to wait until the end of his term. Meanwhile, tonight is debate night. We'll be doing live coverage. It's the final debate, so it's last bootlicks for Vivaswamy and last boot lifts for DeSantis.
You were so close. It's not Vivaswamy, but I mean, you can call him that.
Vivek Ramaswamy.
Maybe that can be his new rap name.
I distracted it because I didn't get anything out of the last boot lifts.
Davake. Right? That was his name?
Rhymes with a fake.
Yeah.
So I didn't get anything for those last boot lifts.
It really was great. You just had
U.S. job
trouble on takeoff. Yeah.
Openings drop slightly in October. SAG-AFTRA ratifies its contract with about 75% of about 40% of its union voting yes. Rest in peace, Norman Lear. And lastly, but not leastly, November, the 6th straight month setting heat records on this planet. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. My apologies to Vivek Ramaswamy. I don't know. I just I
mean, who cares?
He's been out of the news for a while.
Half the stuff I can't fit it on here, and so I'm like scribbling like a Vivek and Ramaswamy written on top of each other, and then I don't care, but it stepped on my boot.
It stepped on your joke. It was a great joke.
So another debate, the last debate tonight.
We'll have some fun tonight
on the trail.
Yes. By the way, it's Hump Day. Hello.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Hump Day. I don't want to speak for anybody else here, but I'm going to probably be drinking a decent amount tonight during the debate. So
wouldn't have it any other way.
There you go. The most intriguing thing will be that it's a News Nation is carrying it, and we'll see if they'll ding us at some point with some false claim that we're not adding value to this thing. Because frankly, I can't even imagine watching this without us mocking it, to be honest with you.
I wonder if adding value to this sort of thing is trying to multiply zero.
Yeah,
right.
There's a good point. We'll save that argument for the court case. Meanwhile, let's talk about this. We are now on resolution number 2 in attempting to sort of silence, I guess, critics of, and never mind Zionism for a moment. This is a blatant attempt to silence critics of an assault on a civilian population that we really don't have an analog to in history. It is the case that we've had civilians in Yemen, let's say, for instance, tens of thousands of civilians killed. We have not seen, in recent memory, but we have not seen the kind of leveling by bombs in this shorter period of time, maybe ever.
It's unprecedented.
In terms of like, even you go back to World War II, you did not see the demolition of standing cities and buildings and the dispossession of people take place this quickly.
Yeah. The Financial Times had a piece today looking at specifically damage to urban areas and comparing it to World War II, to Sam's point. And northern Gaza, around, they estimate 68% of buildings have been damaged severely during the conflict. And that is similar.
And we should say conventional weapons, obviously.
Yes, and that's similar
Nagasaki,
to
Hiroshima,
right.
Different ball game.
That's similar to the multi-year-long destruction in like places like Dresden, and in fact, it's higher in terms of percentage.
But this is a flagrant attempt to silence people who are protesting against that attack on civilians, and then also, of course, it's a flagrant attempt to silence people who are critical of the ethno-nationalist state and form of government that exists in Israel. Both those things. We have seen this in the past where people engaging in a boycott, states around the country have said you cannot get hired by the state. If you are a speech therapist in Texas trying to provide services to an elementary school, help some kid who maybe has a lisp or stutters or whatever it is, and you've ever participated in a boycott or supported the boycott of Israel based upon its occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, you can be denied that contract on those grounds. That exists in, I don't know how many states it is in this country. I think it's at least maybe a dozen at this point. Maybe half a dozen. And this is like that. And and Jews know that you can be not anti-Semitic, but against the idea of a ethno-national state for a myriad of reasons, not the least of which it doesn't seem to have worked in terms of protecting Jews.
Yeah.
Here's Gerald Nadler from the Upper West Side of Manhattan, which it gets about as it's pretty Jewy there if you've never been. And here's Gerald Nadler rising to speak against this resolution that all anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism.
More problematically, the resolution suggests that all anti-Zionism, it states that all anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. That is either intellectually disingenuous or just factually wrong. And it unfairly implicates many of my Orthodox former constituents in Brooklyn, many of whose families rose from the ashes of the Holocaust. While most anti-Semitism is indeed anti-Semitic, the authors, if they were at all familiar with Jewish history and culture, should know about Jewish anti-Zionism that was and is expressly not anti-Semitic. This resolution ignores the fact that even today, certain Orthodox Hasidic Jewish communities, the Satmar in New York and others, as well as adherents of the pre-state Jewish labor movement, have held views that are at odds with the modern Zionist conception. According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, quote, the anti-Zionist worldview of the ultra-Orthodox groups, like the Satmar Hasidim, perceives Zionism and the establishment of the State of Israel as an anti-Messianic act. That is to say that these ultra-Orthodox Hasidic Jews believe that only the Messiah can bring about the true Israel. And I assure you, the Satmar Hasidic Jews are certainly not anti-Semitic. I should also note that there are those who try to smear even progressive pro-Israel supporters with the inappropriate label of Israel hater or anti-Zionist. Under this resolution, those who love Israel deeply but criticize some of its policy approaches could be considered anti-Zionist. That could make every democratic Jewish member of this body, because they all criticize the recent Israeli judicial reform package, de facto anti-Semites. Might that be the author's intention?
Well, I would say yes, because it was brought by a Republican House.
Indeed. And I should correct myself. I'm being corrected. It was about 35 or 36 states in the country that now can discriminate against you in hiring if you've been supportive of boycotting. That's seems contrary to the First Amendment, frankly.
Yes.
I don't even know how that hasn't been tested, frankly.
I mean, it's been one of the refrains every time a free speech issue comes up the entire time I've been doing this professionally is like, hey, where do you stand on all these bills going through, I don't know if it's ALEC supporting it, but they seem to be very similar going through legislatures across the country. No, let's talk about moderation.
I think part of why it hasn't been challenged is because, seemingly what gets to the Supreme Court these days are well-funded right-wing groups that are putting their pet projects to the fore. I saw someone tweet who is a Jewish man essentially saying the House just declared that basically a House of mostly white Christians just passed a resolution categorizing me as an unacceptable kind of Jew. And I feel like that really sums it up here, because as we said on the program and have been recently, the right-wing Christian Zionist project is working overtime right now to redefine anti-Semitism as not hatred of Jews, but of people who are in opposition to white Western power as it exerts itself through the top recipient of our military aid in the Middle East, and that is the Israeli government. And that is a very dangerous proposition because it both puts a target on people's backs who are critics of Israel, as we've mentioned, but also dilutes notions of anti-Semitism in the long run and ties them to a foreign country where that is not what the lived experience of people who experience anti-Semitism in this country, are. It's not the immediate reality, I would say, or it's not going to do anything to alleviate those experiences. It'll only exacerbate it.
I would also say that, there was a time in this country where the idea that you had to have loyalty to Israel, if you were Jewish, was considered an anti-Semitic slur. Yeah. The idea of dual loyalty was considered an anti-Semitic slur. Apparently, we've put in a little moratorium on that. I should say those BDS laws apparently went up or were they've been challenged. I know, at least in Texas. In Texas, they were upheld. The Supreme Court has refused to at this point review those laws. So you're right about that. All right, we're going to take a quick break in a moment and be back with Ian Millhiser, senior correspondent at Vox. First, a couple of words from our sponsors today. I know when you donate money, you want to make sure that it has a lot of impact. In 2007, a group of donors had that exact question. And when they sought out information from charities, they found it hard to get anything other than, nice pictures and stories. Their experience led them to create GiveWell. It's an organization that provides rigorous, transparent research about the best giving opportunities they've found. We've advertised for GiveWell, I don't know now, 5 or 6 years at least. They have spent over 15 years researching charitable organizations, and they only direct funding to a few of the highest impact opportunities they've found in global health and poverty alleviation. This is a great resource for you folks. If you're looking to donate, particularly people tend to do that end of year sometimes. Over 100,000 donors have used GiveWell to donate more than $1 billion. Rigorous evidence suggests that these donations will save over 150,000 lives and improve the lives of millions more. GiveWell wants donors, as many donors as possible, to make informed decisions about high impact giving. And here's the thing. You can find all of their research, all of their recommendations on their site for free. You can make a tax-deductible donation to their recommended funds or charities, and GiveWell doesn't even take a cut. This site, I have found multiple charities through this site that I have given to over the years. And they've shifted over the past couple of years to focus in on, I guess this year, the top 4 performing charities. And for me, the one that I support are direct payments for vaccinations, because in my mind, it's a twofer. One, and we're talking internationally, one, the vaccinations themselves obviously help children from getting diseases and whatnot. And then the direct payments to the family allow them to decide what they're going to do with that money and deploy it in the way that is most useful for them. And all the research shows that's the best way to help alleviate things like extreme poverty, et cetera, et cetera. But in addition to the vaccinations, they also, like, for instance, they have one charity that would provide bed nets to prevent malaria. It costs about $5 for one net. Nets reduce the number of malaria infections. Enough nets and large enough drop in infections can save a life in expectation. So if you've donated through GiveWell before, you can have your donation, even if you've never donated, I should say, through GiveWell before, you can have your donation matched up to $100 right now before the end of the year, or as long as those matching funds last. To claim your match, go to givewell.org, pick podcast, enter the Majority Report with Sam Seder at checkout, and make sure they know that you heard about GiveWell from the Majority Report with Sam Seder, and you will get your donation matched. Again, that's givewell.org to donate or find out more. They have a lot of research there, and they also incredibly transparent about things that they've messed up on in the past, things where they've given in the past. Really worth checking it out. The site itself is very impressive. Also sponsored today, these guys sent us stuff a long time ago, and I asked Michael if he wanted to use it. He didn't want to use it. And recently it occurred to me, I should use this. Because, things are starting to thin a little bit up here. Talking about Nutrafol. And the thing I like about Nutrafol is you don't have to choose between better hair growth and your health. Nutrafol provides a whole body health approach for men that promotes healthier hair. No drugs, no compromises, just better hair. And I've been taking it now, I think, for about a year, and it really does seem to have made a difference. Then I figured, why not? Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement. It is clinically shown to improve your hair growth, clinically shown to increase visible thickness and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol's hair growth supplements use physician-formulated natural science-based ingredients. Their drug-free patented technology provides consistent, reliable results without compromising your sexual health. Go to Nutrafol.com/men, take their hair health wellness quiz, identify the causes of your thinning hair, and Nutrafol will give you a personalized plan for better hair health through whole body wellness. And they do so by targeting root causes of thinning hair, such as stress and hormones and environment and nutrition, lifestyle and metabolism through whole body health. I'd say I ticked off about 6 of those. I'm 6 for 6 on all of those problems. And it works. Clinical study, 84% of men showed improvement in their hair after 6 months of taking Nutrafol's men hair growth supplements. Take the first step to visibly thicker and healthier hair. Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping When you go to Nutrafol.com/men, enter the promo code TMR. Find out why over 4,000 healthcare professionals recommend Nutrafol for healthier hair. Nutrafol.com/men, spelled NUTRAFOL.com/men. Enter promo code TMR. That's Nutrafol.com/men, promo code TMR. We'll put the link in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. Quick break. Ian Millhiser, senior correspondent at Vox. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. Joining us by phone, Ian Millhiser, senior correspondent at Vox. Ian, welcome back to the program.
Good to be here. Thanks so much.
A couple of cases that wanted to talk to you about that are in front of the Supreme Court. Again, we're just in the process where I've heard them, or we've gone through oral arguments. So some of this is speculation, but the first one I'd love you to explain to us is Moore v. U.S. because I've tried to talk about it a little bit, but it at one point it starts getting pretty Byzantine, it seems. And it centers around the ability to assess taxes on profits that have yet to be realized. In other words, someone has an asset and they haven't sold it yet. That's as far as I can get it. Walk us through this.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really complex case, but like the bottom line that you need to know about it is that it's a stalking horse to try to prevent very, very wealthy people from having their wealth taxed. And like the thing to understand there, so for the most part, the federal government taxes your income. It taxes the new money that you make. It does not generally tax people's wealth. So if I've got $50 million sitting in a stock brokerage account somewhere, or, sitting in my art collection somewhere or something, the government generally won't tax that money. And there have been some proposals, the leading ones from Senator Elizabeth Warren, to add a wealth tax to the federal taxation system. The idea is that this is a way that we can start to get at the problem of wealth inequality. This is a way that we can make sure that a few billionaire families aren't powerful for generations to come. And so this lawsuit is an effort to essentially shut that down before it happens.
And let me just say this as by way of explanation. If I've got $50 million, let's say I keep it in a CD because I'm very conservative in that respect, but I'm getting 5% interest. The money that I make on interest there, the $2.5 million, that gets taxed.
That's correct.
Or if I have $50 million worth of stock, which I bought for $30 million, and I sell that $50 million, the $20 million gets taxed. If I sell it, but if I haven't sold it, it's considered an unrealized gain because I haven't actually sold it yet.
That's correct. Yeah. So the way the system works now is that people are generally taxed on their profits and not on the wealth itself. And so, and then the other important point that you brought up is that the taxation typically doesn't happen until you sell your investment. So, if I don't have $50 million, but let's say I have $1,000 and I put $1,000 in the stock market and then I sell it a year later for $2,000. I am taxed on the $1,000 in profit that I make. And that rule that you're generally not taxed until it's called realization. You're generally not taxed until you sell or otherwise dispose of the asset is normally a pretty good rule. It's normally a pretty good rule because it's often difficult to tell how much an asset is worth until it is sold. So you don't want a situation where someone has an asset, no one knows how much it's worth, and so no one knows how much money this person owes the government in taxes. But there are exceptions. There are actually lots of exceptions where people can be taxed on what's called unrealized income. They can be taxed on, money, assets that have gained value, but that haven't, been sold yet. And the question in this case is whether to cut that all off and basically protect people who have huge stockpiles of wealth from being taxed on the wealth itself and not on just the income that they earn.
Now, just to be clear, we're talking about the federal government's ability here, right? Because I think a lot of people are very familiar that houses and property are taxed by your local governments. And, I can maybe look on Zillow and get an idea of how much my house is worth. but I don't really know. And I may have bought the house for $250,000 and now it's worth 3.25, or something to that effect. I mean, so we do as a society, both on a local level, at least, taxed unrealized gains, right? Because if your house goes up in value, even if you haven't seen that value realized, you get taxed on it. It gets reassessed. So this is a federal question?
That's exactly right. Yeah. So your local government, you often have property taxes. Typically state and local governments have entire infrastructures in place so they can assess the value of people's homes, so they know what the property taxes are. The federal government historically has not had property taxes. And one reason for this is that there's this bizarre provision of the Constitution that is at the heart of this Moore case. It says that direct taxes must be apportioned. And what that means is, like, if, say, Maryland has 8% of the national population, then 8% of the taxes collected, of the direct taxes collected, must come from Maryland. And
by the federal government.
By the federal government, that's correct. And that makes it next to impossible to have any kind of income tax or wealth tax, or really any kind of tax, because wealth and income is not distributed evenly amongst the population of all 50 states. The problem with this direct tax clause, though, is literally no one knows what a direct tax is. The framers didn't know. They wrote it into the Constitution as part of a compromise over slavery, and they didn't actually all agree on what this word means. If you read the Supreme Court's decisions, the Supreme Court's decisions make it clear that they don't really know what it means, and when they tried to say what it means, they just made something up. And so essentially what the plaintiffs are arguing in this Moore case is that a tax on wealth or a tax on unrealized income violates this provision of the Constitution that no one knows what it means.
And we should also be clear that the reason why the federal government can collect an income tax is because there was an amendment to the Constitution that was passed that would theoretically supersede that, right? The 16th Amendment would supersede that clause, but this is not an income tax. And so they argue that it's not properly apportioned. Is that right?
So technically it's a little more complicated than that. So the reason we can have an income tax, from like the founding until 1895, it was generally understood that we could have income taxes. And then in 1895, in a case called Pollock, the Supreme Court said that no, you cannot have taxes on the income generated from investments. You can't have an income tax on income generated from wages, because of course the Supreme Court back then was controlled by robber barons. But in 1895 they said you cannot have a tax on income from investments. And pretty much everyone thought that decision was wrong. The 16th Amendment was enacted in order to overrule that 1895 decision. And so the way to think of the 16th Amendment isn't that, we couldn't have income taxes and then there was this amendment and now we can. Technically the way to think about it is we could do it, then the Supreme Court said no, and then we enacted an amendment to get rid of the mistake that the Supreme Court made in the Pollock case.
All right, fair enough. And in this particular case, we're talking about monies or wealth, if you will, or value that's being taxed that is overseas. How could that apply to apportion to the states if it's money from overseas? Right. Yeah. So, I mean, if the Supreme Court were to determine that this is a direct tax, then that would be, then the plaintiffs then like the taxes have to be struck down, because it's basically impossible to do a direct tax unless you just have like what is called a head tax, where you say like everyone has to pay $75 no matter who they are, or something like that. That's the only way you can really do it in a way that's apportioned. But anyways, like the specific issue in this case deals with a tax that was part of the 2017 Trump tax bill. And what the Trump tax law did is that it used to be that we tried to tax U.S. corporations who have money that is held in an offshore subsidiary. So like they create a foreign company, they park their money in the foreign company,
and we used to try to tax that money. And, the sympathetic description of what they were trying to do with the Trump tax law is that Congress decided it was too hard to tax that money. So we gave up on trying to tax foreign money that is held by U.S. corporations. And then we said, well, wait a second, that's going to be really expensive to give up that taxing forever. So the law puts in place this one-time offset, which says that if you are a U.S. investor in a foreign company, then you have to pay one-time tax on some of the profits that company has earned. All of this is very complicated, but the reason why the specific tax here matters is because it's taxing people on stock that has gained value but that has not necessarily been sold, unrealized income. And the question is whether it is unconstitutional to do that. And again, if it is unconstitutional to do that, that means that it's not just that this tax gets struck down. This tax is supposed to raise $340 billion, so it's not a small amount of money in place. It means that we can't have wealth taxes. It means that a whole bunch of other existing taxes. So if you are a member of a partnership, if the partnership makes money, the individuals are taxed on it regardless of whether they receive that money or not. That would be unconstitutional. There's entities called S corps and F corps that are taxed in a similar way. There's a long history of taxing foreign investments where people can be taxed before they sell the asset. And if the Supreme Court strikes all of that down, we're potentially talking about trillions of dollars of money that just evaporates. All of a sudden, the federal government needs to figure out how to keep the lights on without hundreds of billions or potentially trillions of dollars in income that it was planning on. So it would be a really, really big deal if the Supreme Court were to strike down all these taxes. The good news is, based on the oral argument yesterday, there didn't seem to be much of an appetite for that.
And was there ever the irony about all of this, I should just say, and that doesn't necessarily have any bearing on the case, is that the reason why we had this problem where corporations would hide their money offshore and we would beg them to repatriate it. We did it in 2004, and Bush gave them a big discount on that taxation, ostensibly under the bill called, I think it was the American Jobs Act, if I remember correctly, which ended up not creating any jobs. In fact, one of the biggest sort of promoters of it, I think at that time, was Hewlett Packard, and they cut 14,000 jobs after their money was repatriated. And then what happens is these corporations hold it offshore until the next Republican who's going to come by and give them the same tax break. But the idea that you could keep the money there and not have it taxed before it was repatriated was in and of itself a tax break that Eisenhower, that happened under the Eisenhower administration as a way of building up Europe and Japan after World War II.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if Congress wanted to, at least under existing law, if Congress wanted to, it can tax U.S. companies on all of their income. So, including the income that they, potentially let me try speaking again, including the income that they make overseas. Now, that said, I mean, we've chosen not to do that. There has been, a series of forgivenesses until, this finally in 2017, Congress just said, we're going to give up on taxing this money. All of that, though, is sort of tangential to this case. The issue in this case is, does our elected representatives, and, I don't like what they did in 2017, but should the people who are elected to set our tax policy get to decide that, or should it be decided by 9 lawyers in black robes? And, there really isn't a principled way to distinguish the tax in this Moore case from all these other taxes that exist. There are, Justice Alito was ranting against it because Justice Alito wants the Republicans to win every case, and he wants Republican policies to be implemented. But if Justice Alito wants Republican policies to be implemented, and this is actually a Republican bill, it just includes this offset, he could run for Congress, and he can have the proper branch decide what our Congress is. Instead, this case is an attempt to shunt these important questions, who is taxed, how much are they taxed, to the one branch of government that is not elected and that currently has a Republican supermajority.
Let's also, I just want to hear this clip from Sonia Sotomayor, and you tell us just sort of like how it, what she's referring to specifically in terms of like they're being asked, according to Sotomayor, to essentially announce what put a definition of realization of profits, create one that is sort of like a one size fits all. And here's what she said.
If what we do is to think about a particular tax, which seems to be what we've been doing for over 100 years, to see whether that tax is income as understood by attribution or as an excise tax or by other principles, we wouldn't have to we would consider each tax on its own form. You're asking us to just announce what realization is out of context. And for the last 100 years, we've been studiously avoiding doing that because we recognize that it's dangerous to do that. To state a word like realization, we then have to come up with a working definition that applies to every piece of property and every way in which people gain wealth. It doesn't seem logical to me.
All right. Walk us through that. She's basically saying that you can't run a government that way because there is no one size fits all. Different contexts and different, and sort of like, I guess, innovation, financial innovation, calls for you to have like agencies deal with this.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, I think the background to what she's saying there is that wealthy people have really good tax lawyers. And they have really good tax lawyers who, like, a lot of what they do is they cull through the tax code or they cull through Supreme Court decisions defining a particular term. And then they will design, whether it is an investment, whether it's a trust, they will design some sort of system that technically does not fit in that definition. And so, one risk you have is that if the Supreme Court comes up with a one-size-fits-all definition of an important tax concept like realization, then tax lawyers will come up with some sort of vehicle that just doesn't fit into that definition, but still allows investors to earn the same amount of money that they would earn otherwise. And so you just wind up having all of this untaxed income. The other problem is that it skews the investment markets. So, like, let's say the Supreme Court comes up with a definition of what is realization, and that definition excludes, money that is earned in the state of Idaho. What's going to happen if the Supreme Court comes up with that definition is that everyone's just going to move their money to Idaho, and like corporations are going to relocate their headquarters in Idaho, and like everyone's going to try to like get some sort of connection to Idaho in their investments because that way they can avoid taxes. And that's, not how we want a market economy to work. We don't want people to make investment choices based on what's going to help them avoid taxes. We want people to make investment choices based on what they think is most likely to, be a good investment. Right.
All right. Well, and so I guess we'll find out how they rule in June or July on that one, but as far as you could tell from the questioning, it doesn't look like it's going to be as problematic as it could have been.
I think that's right. I mean, they might write a very narrow opinion that sort of leaves open the question of what happens if Elizabeth Warren gets the majority she needs to pass her wealth tax.
Right.
But I think they realize that, like, regardless of what they think about some hypothetical future tax that probably will never get passed anyway, they shouldn't hand down a decision that nukes so much of the current tax code that the federal government can't keep the lights on anymore.
Let's move to SEC versus Jarchese, or Jarchese.
I think it's Jarchese.
Jarchese. This is a case which, and I don't know for how many years that we've been having you on and we've been talking about things like the non-delegation doctrine or the Chevron doctrine, and now the so-called major questions doctrine, which I think you and I have actually I've been interviewing you longer than that has existed in practice. But it is one that is like sort of completely turning over the apple cart in terms of like American jurisprudence, as far as I can tell. But this concept that essentially would both or inhibit Congress from delegating authority to agencies where they have expertise, and also the deference that courts have to these agencies when agencies are making, questions of executing and developing regulations to carry out congressional will. This is a case that could have touched upon that as well.
Yes. So what this case involves, first of all, the SEC is the federal agency that protects investors from fraud from the companies they're investing in. It has existed since the Roosevelt administration, and the relevant laws governing the SEC haven't been changed in more than a dozen years. So despite all of that, the Fifth Circuit, which is, the Trumpiest court in America, a court that is, seems to be looking for ways to sabotage the federal government, declared that the SEC's methods for bringing enforcement actions against people who allegedly defraud investors violates the Constitution in 3 different ways. Now, just as a general rule, if you have an agency that's been around for 80 years and the laws governing that agency haven't changed in more than a dozen years, and someone comes along and says, hey, I found that this violates the Constitution, not 1, not 2, but 3 different ways, don't trust that person. If there's a lot of litigation in the United States, if something is unconstitutional, it only gets noticed fairly quickly, and if it doesn't get noticed fairly quickly, we certainly don't miss 3 different, some of them very novel constitutional problems. So,
and particularly when it comes to something like finance, right? That's half their job is suing the U.S. government in terms of trying to release themselves from regulation.
Right. Yeah. This is a case about securities fraud, and there's lots of money, obviously, in securities. Companies have an interest in both knowing what the law is and in challenging the law if it hurts them in any way. So, if there was a serious violation going on, you'd think someone would have found it by now, much less 3 of them. But anyway, so here's what the issue is that at least the Supreme Court cared about. And the good news is that the Supreme Court looks likely to shrink this case, although they still look likely to use it in order to diminish, some of the federal government's ability to govern. So the SEC has these officials that are called administrative law judges. And what administrative law judges are is they are judges who are experts in securities fraud. And so if the SEC brings an enforcement action against someone, in this case they brought it against a hedge fund that's accused of defrauding its investors, they have the option, instead of bringing it before what's called an Article III court, sort of generalist courts that hear all sorts of issues, they have the option of bringing it before one of these administrative law judges. And, a big reason why the SEC would want to do that is because these judges actually know what they're talking about. Securities fraud is really complicated. You want judges who understand, not just the law of securities fraud, but they understand the business here, understand the concepts that they're going to be dealing with, because people who know what they're talking about are more likely to get the answer right. And so that's why you have these administrative law judges. The Supreme Court seemed very concerned that this administrative law judge process doesn't allow for jury trials. And, again, I think the reason why it doesn't allow for jury trials would be pretty obvious, because the whole point of these administrative proceedings is that you want the case to be heard by an expert and not by, 12 randos who probably know nothing about securities law.
And we should say these are not criminal cases, right? These are civil cases.
Yes. Yeah, that is an important point. These are not criminal cases. If you're being accused of a crime, you have an absolute right to a jury trial. That's the Sixth Amendment. If you're not accused of a crime, if it is a civil case, the Seventh Amendment to the Constitution says that in some civil cases you're entitled to a jury. But the phrase that it uses is at common law. Like, basically it means that you are being sued under a provision that, under a legal doctrine that derives from common law principles that have been around since like the pre-colonial years, rather than being sued under a statute, rather than being sued under an act of Congress. But in any event, the Supreme Court, based on at least what I heard in the oral argument, probably isn't going to accept any of the more Baroque, like, let's destroy the whole federal government's ability to operate theories that the Fifth Circuit latched onto. But I think it is likely to say that these sort of expert forums that exist probably cannot continue to exist, at least not in their current form.
And we should say that, like, the number of administrative courts, if you will, in the federal government, like, we're talking like we have this in immigration, we have it in, all sorts of like regulatory enforcement in the country. It would be devastating. And not to mention, just like from a practical standpoint, like, you would have to ramp up the federal judiciary. But but in terms of like having judges not be sort of, I guess, all political appointments as well, so that we could know before someone even gets into the courtroom how they're going to rule on this case. All right. So your sense is that is going to remain intact, and that's not going to be that much of a problem, although they're going to do their best on this. Let me just ask you this. Why does the Supreme Court hear these cases that like seem like they're swinging for the fences?
Yeah. It's an excellent question. I mean, and it's a particularly good question because at least this term, it seems that, like, even in this right-wing Supreme Court, a lot of the justices are looking at some of these cases going, whoa, that's too far even for us. So I think there's a few phenomena going on here. One is just that lawyers are smart, and when they see the Supreme Court move to the right-wing lawyers will bring more cases, and, more lefty lawyers will not bring a lot of lawsuits because they don't want to lose. And so you see more Hail Mary cases being brought because you just have more right-wing lawyers saying, well, now I've got a shot with this with this argument. So that's one phenomenon. The second phenomenon is you have judges, especially on the Fifth Circuit, but, in other places too, who are very partisan, who want to push the law to the right, who want to force the Supreme Court to hear issues by, like, striking down some exorbitant amount of the federal government and then requiring the Supreme Court to step in and pick up the pieces. And you also have a lot of judges on these lower courts who are auditioning, who want Donald Trump to promote them to the Supreme Court. And they think if they make a big splash and show, like, look, I'm on the cutting edge of Federalist Society thinking, that, this will help them catch the eye of a Republican president in the future. So, you have a few phenomena going on here.
Let me just explain, or have you explain to people, like, so if you're talking about like the Fifth Circuit which you describe as the most Trumpiest of circuits, you're talking about 5 or 6 states. I can't.
So the Fifth Circuit is Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi.
Okay.
So if you bring a federal lawsuit or you are sued in Texas, Mississippi, or Louisiana, when your case is appealed, it will go to the Fifth Circuit.
And the reason why the Supreme Court needs to hear that case is because if they were to rule that the SEC can't use administrative judges out of the Fifth Circuit, and that was to let stand, and the Supreme Court didn't address it, then in that jurisdiction, they wouldn't need to use, they wouldn't be allowed to use administrative judges, right? So the Supreme Court is obligated to hear that case.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, they're not literally obligated in the sense that, like, nothing's going to happen to them if they don't hear the case. But the point of the Supreme Court, the reason why we have one court at the top of our whole judicial system, is to maintain the uniformity of federal law. You don't want a situation where federal law means one thing in Michigan and means a completely different thing in Texas.
Is there a dynamic where Roberts, at this point, in the wake of Dobbs and in the wake of like these clear ethical issues that the court is having, that Roberts is like, if we can have cases where, the question is around, should we essentially have a functioning federal government, and we weigh in with a result that is yes, okay, a begrudging yes. I mean, is this part of Roberts' sort of like mentality of like, I need to bail some water here at a time where the Supreme Court legitimacy is in serious question?
Yeah, I mean, my short answer to that is you'd have to ask John Roberts that.
Right.
But like, just as from what I can tell from the outside looking in, like the Supreme Court, this group of Republican justices, the 6 Republican justices who sit on the Supreme Court right now, came in with a pretty clear agenda. They had like a list of boxes they want to check. We're going to get rid of Roe v. Wade. We're going to get rid of affirmative action. We're going to give ourselves a veto power over any decision made by a federal agency. We're going to give religious conservatives, and specifically Christian conservatives, broad exemptions from following federal and state laws. Like, they had an agenda. And I even wrote a book about that agenda called The Agenda. And as it turns out, they have now fulfilled that agenda. Like, they have checked all their boxes on the list. And so one possibility is that Roberts and maybe Kavanaugh are looking back and saying, man, everyone hates us right now. We should probably hand the liberals some victories so we don't look like a bunch of partisan hacks. The other more optimistic possibility is what's going on here is they've come in with their list, with their checklist of things that they're going to accomplish. They have now finished they've now checked all the boxes. And so having checked all the boxes, they still have a job as a Supreme Court justice, and they still have all these cases coming. And in the absence of the agenda, the optimistic take is maybe they're going to be real judges now. Maybe now that they've done all the things that they were picked to do, maybe they're going to try to be real judges now. I think we need more information before we know which one of those is the case. But it does seem to be that in this term, they are trying to rein in the most absurd elements of the judiciary after spending the previous 2 terms checking off a bunch of boxes on an agenda list.
And I guess we'll have to have you back in I don't know at what point we'll have a better sense of that. But in the meantime, Ian, if you'll indulge me with 2 more quick cases, 2 different cases. One is there is a case in front of the Supreme Court now where the Sackler family, facing essentially bankruptcy for their family, and I mean that in a colloquial sense, essentially took Purdue Pharmacy into bankruptcy and sort of rolled their liability as individuals into that bankruptcy case as a way of protecting themselves, their personal money from creditors too. I wonder your perspective on this. The Supreme Court is looking at this. And this is a bankruptcy that is not available to your average Joe, as it were. I mean, what's your take on this? And how can we best understand this case?
Yeah, so this is a difficult case. And so as I understand the issue here, so as part of the bankruptcy proceedings arising out of the opioid crisis, Purdue Pharmacy agreed, the deal was reached that they would pay, I think it's $6 billion to help provide relief to victims of the opioid crisis. And as part of that agreement, the Sackler family themselves are basically immunized from the process. So, like, the $6 billion will come out of Purdue Pharmacy, but all of the stockpiled wealth that members of this family that profited from, providing opioids to everyone, like, their personal wealth will not be touched. And the question is basically whether that should be allowed, whether we should be allowed to reach this deal where, people are going to get a lot of relief, but these people who are bad actors, or at least who have profited, some of them are the descendants of the bad Sacklers. But these people who have profited from this family that did terrible things, whether they should get to hold on to their assets. And the answer is that, like, there's a whole lot of disagreement amongst the stakeholders in this case. So, like, it's a federal agency that's actually in court saying, hey, we don't think this arrangement is fair. There is a minority of the victims of the opioid crisis who are also saying, hey, we don't think this is fair. But there's also a lot of people who, there are states that want to get their chunk of the relief money. There are individuals who want to get their, there's a lot of groups that all are like, look, like, this is some combination of, we think this is the best deal that we can get, and we're hurting right now, and we need that money. And, punishing this family that did terrible things is a secondary importance. I don't know where the Supreme Court's going to come out on this case. I mean, just as a moral and a policy matter, I'm not sure I have a view on where it should come out, because, I mean, the tension here is the tension between wanting to help as many people as we can help right now, and between making sure that this family isn't enriched for its unjust action.
Right. And lastly, let me ask you this question, because it's come up. There is 36 states that have this legislation that says if you support BDS, you can't get a state contract. The most famous is that case out of Texas, where a speech therapist was fired, working with the school district because they had supported BDS in some fashion or had a website or something to that effect. That case came up to the Supreme Court, I think, in at the beginning of this year, and was rejected. What's your sense of, like, how does something like that get resolved? It seems so blatantly against the First Amendment. We hear a lot of people complain about lack of free speech because, somebody got booed and chased off of a college campus. But these are literally the government saying, this is one type of protest we're going to punish you for.
Yeah. So, I mean, I haven't followed this case very closely, but I can give you some general First Amendment principles.
Great.
So it does sound sketchy. I mean, the argument that these states can make is, as a general rule, the government does have a lot of power over how it wants to spend its own money. And so if the government, doesn't want to hire a particular, the federal government, especially in Democratic administrations, uses this power all the time to say, if you want to get a contract with the federal government, you need to pay up the prevailing wage. If you want a contract with the federal government, you cannot discriminate against, the following individuals. And we don't want the government to lose the power to say, if you want to work with us, here are the things that you need to do, because often that leads to a lot of very good worker-friendly things happening.
But all that, from my understanding, has been tested in court as to whether it's a compulsion of speech, right? The idea that, and that, the right wing has always tried to say, you can't tell us that our employees have to wash their hands. You're compelling our speech in some way, and that those have failed. So this is it's one thing to say we want the government to be able to impose certain requirements on contractors. It's another to say we want to inhibit their speech in a pretty explicit way. I mean, this isn't like we're forcing you to, or keeping you from saying you don't have to wash your hands when you go out and serve people food. This is pretty explicit.
Yeah, so I think the way that I would analyze, and again, I haven't read the briefs in this case, so like there might be other case law I'm not aware of, but I think that I would analyze these using the rationale that the court has often used for government employees. So like the rule, if you are a government employee, is essentially the government can control what you say within the scope of your employment. So like if I am a math teacher employed by the state of Texas, I can't walk into class every day and decide I'm not going to teach math. I'm going to teach, 16th century Japanese art history.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with 16th century Japanese art history, but I'm not. That's not what I was hired to do. I was hired to teach math, and the state can control my speech in that context. But when I am speaking about a matter of public concern, when I'm off the clock, and especially if I'm conveying information that I might have special access to, that there's a matter of public concern because I am, because I'm inside the system, that is normally First Amendment protected speech. And so, if Texas is hiring someone because Texas wants to convey a position on, the Israel-Palestine conflict, I think it could tell, if it hires a PR consultant to convey Texas's position that it is pro-Israel and anti-Palestine, I think that Texas could demand that PR consultant say the thing that the PR consultant is being hired to do. But if Texas is hiring someone to, provide school lunches, your position on Israel and Palestine is irrelevant to whether or not you can provide school lunches. That person isn't being hired to have a viewpoint on Israel. That person is being hired to provide hamburgers. And so I would think that in the case of the person who is not being hired for something that is any way relevant to Israel and Palestine, they're allowed to, on their own time, say what they want to say about Israel and Palestine. But again, I'd have to review the briefs in this case to give specifics about how I think it should come down.
Well, Ian Millhiser, I can't thank you enough for walking us through these things. You made it possible for me not to have to finish law school years and years ago. And the level of indebtedness I feel to you for that, I cannot express in words. Ian Millhiser, senior correspondent at Vox, really appreciate your time today.
All right, thank you.
All right, folks. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to head into the fun half of the program, wherein we will take your phone calls and we will have fun.
Have fun.
And, we're not going to go too crazy because we got to save some of the fun for tonight.
Oh, yes.
When we have the final showdown.
I mean,
where is it going to be?
Whatever. Who cares?
Alabama.
Who cares?
The drama in Alabama.
The
anticlimax
the anticlimax in Alabama.
You know that
Matt took a day off yesterday for his birthday.
It was actually to lament.
Completely over it right now. He's whatever.
It was a day off to lament the exit of Doug Burgum to the campaign.
He's so pissed.
I mean, you're just
so
like
pissed.
you're like what's the meaning of life?
I already have
Burgum's?
seasonal affective disorder. It's December,
Oh my God.
and then the only sunshine in my life was Doug Burgum's campaign for Republican primary.
I have a light box back there, incidentally.
Yeah, I need it.
You can use it.
DeSantis' team after the Newsom debate referred to it as the Thrilla in Alpharetta because it was in Alpharetta,
DeSantis'
Georgia.
team,
and that's why he is going nowhere.
Yeah,
the Thrilla in Alpharetta.
But the big thing is, folks,
really
we are less than 6 weeks away from the first Republican primary. There's a caucus, right?
Iowa.
In Iowa. So this is it. I mean, we are off to the races.
And one person is already near the finish line.
I mean, we sort of know who the nominees are going to be, barring any force majeure type of situations, which, again, I think we've never been in a scenario where a force majeure type of situation has such potential for happening, but one never knows.
Wait, can you just elaborate that metaphor?
Yeah, that's like the nicest way of Sam saying that one of them's gonna die.
Oh no, one could.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
Or could.
Yeah, I mean, that being that like a a force of nature could change who the
you mean Deus Ex Machina?
No, Deus Ex.
I thought force majeure was the thing where like the guy didn't help his family and ran away.
Well, that's the name of the movie, but that came from that is a contractual term.
It means like a cataclysmic event.
It means a cataclysmic event. Yeah. So if I hire you to work on my movie, but all of a sudden like the show business ends, or there's an earthquake, or there's a fire and it destroys the studio, then we're released from our contract.
Gotcha.
Deus Ex Machina is like a literary term where like, how am I going to resolve this? I know.
Something else.
I know. Here's it just so happened he bumped into the key that's going to open up the secret room, and that's
right.
it.
Yeah, I gotcha. I've never heard it outside of the movie context, so that makes sense.
Didn't you get your master's in literature?
Yeah, but not
This
law.
is like that moment where you told me you hadn't heard of Death of a Salesman.
I do.
I still have trouble getting over that. Yeah.
Well, the problem is Glengarry Glen Ross. I thought that was an adaptation of Death of a Salesman but I was misremembering something somebody said about it, which is they called it Death of a Fucking Salesman.
Okay, got you. All right. I mean, we're really airing some dirty
theater.
laundry.
I mean, I was
here.
born in 1988. You want me to understand theater? Like, nah.
That's so
lost
terrifying. It's so terrifying. I've got my high school reunion, and I graduated before you were born.
Yeah, when is that? That's coming up
January.
soon. Right, in the abandoned old school that's
Well,
about
it's not
to be
abandoned.
demolished.
Yeah, I don't know if it's abandoned yet.
Oh, no, yeah, but still
this could be
eerie.
the last year that it's open, or maybe I don't think they've moved into but it's going to be eerie. Oh,
You
yeah.
should carve your initials into the wall or something.
Well, they're going to tear it down. So what's the point? Nobody's going to see
symbolism.
Nevertheless, tonight is the debate, and it is your last opportunity to hear us mock all of these people. And we're going to have to do some extra mocking because we want to make sure that the product we give you is different enough from what you could get from those people who paid for the rights to cover it, I guess. Or maybe, did they pay? Did they bid for this? Who knows?
This should all be fair use. It's about the future of the democracy of this country, or whatever's left of it. So it's kind of depressing to me that these debates are commodified and held on to by for-profit cable news stations. But, maybe that's a bit of a third or fourth order thing.
Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajority.report.com. You people power this show. And so when you become a member at jointhemajority.report.com, you allow this show to survive and thrive and to sometimes, get a little bit dry and weedy. That's the kind of work we like to do here. Completely lacking in entertainment value in times, and make you feel like you're sitting in a classroom.
I mean,
audience retention poison.
You're doing a great job of selling the debate tonight, Matt, and the show in general, Sam.
That's true. That's true.
Matt says, what's the point?
We'll have some fun. I'll see you out the trail.
Yeah, we're going to move into the fun half. That's where things get lively.
Yes. We have
I
some
can't
fun
tell you
clips
how
today.
many times I was told. I mean, now people don't even mention it anymore, but like a long time ago, I was like, you should be doing the second half for free. And the first half should be the member show because that's for people who want to. And I'm like, no.
No, that doesn't make sense.
I mean, it does make sense from a commercial standpoint because the second half is much more accessible.
Right, but we clip parts of the second half, so it's that some parts of it are free.
But
and
this is even pre-YouTube, like
Yeah.
where people are saying, like, not everybody is going to want to hear the details on a case about the SEC.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't care.
Well,
at
they
one
have
point,
to.
the whole show was given over to the Janus case, or the one that came before that about public sector unions. Every other episode, and we would do a 5 days a week episode, was on that one case. I got stuck in a jag. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, and the Majority Report blend.
Yes.
Which you can get at justcoffee.coop. Use the coupon code Majority, get 10% off that Majority Report blend. You can get other blends too, but
Why would you?
Emma.
Yes. ESPN, we are going, on
really like in a daze.
a little bit. Your soliloquy put me in a bit of a trance. Anyway, so that
was the point I was trying to make.
There you go. On ESPN, we spoke about like the really, incredible Week 13 in terms of like determining who the really elite teams are. The 49ers bullying the Eagles, the Chiefs kind of falling apart. I made a passionate case for Tyreek Hill for MVP. He's the only one who, I think should be considered at the top of the list. And then on Thursday, Bradley and I will be giving our picks against the spread. This is the unfortunate reality of Bradley starting to heat up late in the year. He went 3-0, and I'm starting to get a little nervous. So check us out tomorrow, youtube.com/ESPN show.
Matt!
Last night on Left Reckoning, we had a conversation with Vaclav Masek Sanchez, Guatemalan columnist and sociologist, on the lawfare being conducted against President-elect Bernardo Arevalo. I mean, they have a lame duck term that stretches from like September to January, which is not great, for instance, if there are right-wing elements and judges that are trying to overthrow the results of an election. It gives them a lot of time to work. So we talked about that with Vaclav, had a really great discussion about that and how the legacy of coups and violence in Guatemala plays into what we're seeing now. I had no idea. I knew Arevalo was an anti-corruption candidate. I didn't know that his father was the first democratically elected. I think I knew, but I've forgotten that his father was the first democratically elected president of Guatemala back in the 40s. Yeah, he ran as a anti-corruption guy and won, and now the corrupt system is trying to outlaw or not let him take his place as president. So check that out last night, patreon.com/leftreckoning.
All right, folks, see you in the fun half. 3 months from now, 6 months from now, 9 months from now. And I don't think it's going to be the same as it looks like in 6 months from now. And I don't know if it's necessarily going to be better 6 months from now than it is 3 months from now. But I think around 18 months out, we're going to look back and go like, wow. What? What is that going on? It's nuts. Wait a second. Hold on for a second.
The Majority Report.
Emma, welcome to the program.
Hey.
Matt!
What is up, everyone?
Nomi Key.
You did it. Let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon.
Bradley, you want to say hello?
Sorry to disappoint everyone. I'm just a random guy.
It's all the boys today.
Fundamentally false.
No, I'm sorry. Women's...
Stop talking for a second and let me finish.
Where is this coming from, dude?
But dude, you want to smoke this 7A?
Yes.
Hi, me? This me?
Yes.
Is this me?
Is it me?
It is you.
Is this me? Hello, is this me?
I think it is you. Who is you? No sound. Every single